A moment of courage can change the course of several lives. A humble boy, a date that no one expected, and an outcome that can touch the hardest heart. Want to find out how all this happens? So get ready for a story that will arrest you from beginning to end. Before you start, you already subscribe to the channel and leave your like so as not to lose any details of this exciting journey. A humble boy finds a child starting by the river. Years later, at that same point, fate gives the letters. An abandoned baby, a basket left on the bridge, an uncertain future. The young collector, wrapped in poverty, welcomes the newborn. 10 years later, and surprising reunion in the exact place. There is a woman in despair. What will life reserve for these hearts together by chance? Subscribe to the channel if you want to experience more moving plots like this. Leave your like in the video and comment from which city accompanies us. The sun had barely appeared on the horizon, but Miguel was already getting up. The cold dawn made the skin shiver, and he moved silently for the little makeshift house not to wake up Dona Rosa, her mother. She was sick, with high fever, and her body so weak that she could hardly get out of the mattress. But that day would be different. There was urgency, and he needed to be firm. His sister Clara also faced severe asthma crises, and Miguel could no longer postpone her search. Carefully, she collected the last pieces of bread they still had, spread them over the wooden table, and began the preparation of the coffee. The smell was little, but it warmed a hungry stomach. As the small bonfire was cracking, the silence of the house left the constant memory that their lives were fragile. Still, they survived there. They were sustained in a daily battle that did not give a truce. While moving coffee, he thought of everything he needed to earn that day. The money had almost been running out, and the pressure on its shoulders grew every second. He knew that once again, he would have to rummage to the cold streets behind something he could sell or exchange for medicines. There was no option. It would have to face the city, even if cold, once again. When Dona Rosa woke up, she looked even more downcast. However, the smile that directed him, although trembling, illuminated the small space. "It will be all right, my son," he babbled, a voice hoarse like a weak whisper. Miguel, however, was aware of the hard reality. He knew her mother tried to convey hope that she was not sure if she had. But for her and by Clara, it was worth everything. Carrying the recycling cart, it came out in the first light of day, facing the wind that punished the empty streets. Each alley looked like a mirror of his tired soul, but there was an inner strength that made him move on, a silent faith in a better tomorrow, even if everything seemed obscure. As he pushed the cart, he watched the city awaken. The clarity touched the old facades, emphasizing the beauty that most saw, but for Miguel, symbolized only a scenario of incessant battles. He did not care about the landscape, but to the need to survive, to get what was necessary for his family. Suddenly, the rain surprised him. Each drop looked like a thin blade freezing his skin, but he didn't go back. Time was too precious to be wasted, and he followed. The streets were almost deserted, a reflection of the intense cold that expelled everyone into the house. But there was no choice for Miguel. Either persisted or would lose what still sustained the hope of Dona Rosa and Clara. Even with the water hitting his clothes and dripping on his face, he advanced, ignoring the dangers of moving in any early under the storm. Everything around was hostile, but his determination surpassed the setbacks. It was at this moment that, between the noise of the thunder and the wind, it spotted a group of pickers as suffering as he. One of the pickers, a marked face lady, directed her a warning. "Don't approach the river, boy. The water level is rising." "It's too dangerous," but he could not allow himself to give up. With a slight nod, it followed, each pulse mingling with the force of the rain and the echo of its urgency. Amid the wind, I felt that something big was about to happen, something that would hopelessly change the course of its history. Arriving on the banks of the river, the scene was of chaos, the violent current, the rain punishing the soil and the slippery stones. He dropped the cart so as not to waste time. I needed to check if they would find any material to recycle or sell, anything that helped. But then, what he did not expect, a fragile cry, stuffy by the storm. At first, he imagined being just impression or a noise of the wind. Stopped. The cry sounded again, more sharper. His heart shot, and he ran down the ravine until he faced something unbelievable. There, in an old basket, covered by a torn cloth, was a tiny baby, soaked, crying softly. Faced with that vision, Miguel hesitated. It already had so many problems. The family depended on him. The health of Donna Rosa and Clara was increasingly weakened. But how to ignore that helpless life? Leaving that baby there would be the condemnation of a life to a cruel destiny. He had already known the pain of feeling alone and without support. Memories of her own childhood passed before her eyes. The days with nothing to eat, the nights in course, her scarce help that her mother tried to offer when she was harmful to hold on. That baby evoked everything Miguel knew of misery, but also the spark of hope that makes someone fight. Without hesitation anymore, he took the basket. The rain increased, striking it mercilessly. However, nothing mattered at that moment beyond taking the baby from there. He returned to the cart, safeguarding the child as well as he could, and went home. Along the way, he felt a new weight on his chest, the responsibility for that little existence that was now under his care. When she entered the house, Donna Rosa stared at the scene without believing. He was lying on a trembling mattress, but her gaze found the baby, and something in her expression changed. Clara, even with her asthma, panting chest, tried to lift into bed to see better. "Son, what is this?" asked Donna Rosa, almost without voice. Miguel, soaked and panting, looked at her. "I don't know, Mom. I just know I needed help and couldn't leave it." As he stared at the baby's tiny, pale face, Donna Rosa felt a mix of despair and tenderness. How to take care of one more life when their own was so difficult. However, he could only extend his arms and lightly touch that wet little head. There was not much to say. Everyone in the house sensed that the arrival of that baby would change everything. The night fell on them with a silence full of apprehension. Miguel and Donna Rosa took turns to see if the child breathed well. Clara, even weakened, watched everything, wishing to contribute in some way. It was clear that keeping the baby would require more than they had, but no one dared to abandon him. There was a bond built in the eyes and shared pain. When the next dawn emerged, the rain persisted, dripping on the patched roof. Clara's cough echoed through the room, but curiously, her countenance looked a little firmer. She looked at the newcomers with a gleam in her eyes, as if she saw a reason to breathe better, despite the crises. Miguel got up early to prepare some more coffee. He felt the heavy body in the busy night, but the baby's image curled into the blanket does not come out of his mind. And when the weak cry became hearing again, he ran, fearing that something more serious was happening. Donna Rosa tried to breastfeed the child, even though she had little strength and almost no milk. The baby did not suck well, was as exhausted as they. With a discouraged sigh, the mother extended the baby to Miguel, who received him with a knot in his throat. "He needs more than we can give, my son," she whispered. The boy understood Donna Rosa's anguish. "I was also afraid, insecurity." But then, surprising everyone, Clara got standing, supporting the wall. His voice came out trembling. "Let me help. It may be little, but I want to try." Although with still weak breathing, Clara demonstrated a determination that made Miguel feel the tears sprout. She didn't speak much, for asthma consumed her almost all the time, but her gesture said everything. The union of those three, taking care of a newborn without even a name, showed how precious every minute was. The day ran between attempts to feed the baby with the little milk that Donna Rosa could still produce. Miguel also did his best to buy cheap milk powder, selling some metal pieces I had collected. The tiredness was almost unbearable, but each time I spotted the baby's face, I felt reborn a strength that I couldn't even own. The weeks became months, and the baby, which Donna Rosa called Matthew, continued to grow in that humble but saturated environment. Mother and Clara's illness was still a big challenge, but now there was a stronger goal: to ensure that Matthew would not suffer the same mishaps. Over time, Miguel began working by sweeping a warehouse, gathering exchanged. Even in the midst of pain and cold, the family had an extra reason to persist. Matthew, over the years, has become a source of smiles. The first words aroused a joy that compensated for each effort, every sacrifice. He was a small flame of hope in that house so injured by poverty. Miguel, in turn, saw in Matthew the chance to rewrite his own story and perhaps change his future. And so 10 years have passed. Despite the difficulties, Matthew grew surrounded by love. Donna Rosa's health was still unstable, Clara still suffered occasional crises, and Miguel was fighting for a better job to support everyone. But among them, there were strong ties. Although the house was simple and the accounts weighed, there was unity. And that, they found, it was the greatest treasure of any home. One day, Matthew returned from school with the backpack spent hanging on his shoulder. He was now 10 years old, dark hair like night and a shy smile that often illuminated the environment. The walk to the humble residence was usual, except for the feeling that beat him from time to time, a remote echo saying that there was something about his past he had never knew. On the way, he stopped in the old bridge near the river. In that exact place, it was found. He had no memories, just fragments of what they told him. He watched the dark waters running down and felt a shiver, as if that place kept secrets that somehow still called him. That was when he noticed a woman standing there, leaning against the bridge railing. Dressed in black, her hair tied, she cried in silence. It looked alien to everything. Something in Matthew's heart propelled him to approach. "Girl, are you okay?" he asked gently. She stared at him surprised, dried her face with the mango of her coat, and tried to compose a sad smile. "I'm just remembering old things, boy," answered almost without voice. Matthew felt something strange in his chest, as if her sadness echoed in him. It was there, unsure what to say. The woman sighed, staring at the river. "Years ago, I left something very precious here," he said in a broken whisper, as if talking to himself. Confession echoed in Matthew's mind. He wasn't sure what he meant, but his heart fired. He babbled, "I was left here on this bridge. My brother Miguel found me when I was a baby." The woman turned over, shocked, analyzing every trace of Matthew's face, as if he tried to recognize someone a long time ago. A painful understanding seemed to cross it. It's the boy that—" She didn't complete the sentence. Tears flooded again, and she was taken by a tremor that mixed joy and dread. "My name is Marilia, and I think it's my son." Matthew stepped back, the heart 1,000. He stared at her, not knowing how to deal with that sudden revelation. She then approached hesitantly. "I couldn't take care of you. Life charged me dearly, and I was weak, but I never stopped thinking about you." There was a genuine pain in her voice, something that made him hesitate less. He did not fully understand, but felt that his roots began to appear before him. I didn't know you were still looking for me," he said, feeling an emotion that he couldn't name. Marilia wiped her tears and reached out, but without touching him right away. "If you allow, I would like to know how your life is. Know who created you. See where you live." Matthew, confused, could only mutter that he would take her to his house. If there was any chance of telling her the truth, that Miguel decided what to do. And so, with his shaking legs, he headed with Marilia to that simple place he called home. When they arrived, Miguel answered the door. Seeing Marilia's countenance, something inside immediately suspected who she went. Matthew, not knowing where to start, explained, "Miguel, she said it's my biological mother." The silence weighed like lead. Miguel's expression was by surprise, but also of some fear. He had many questions, many doubts, but the urgency was stamped on Marilia's eyes, which seemed to be begged to be heard. "I left my son on this bridge 10 years ago," she began, an embargoed voice, "and I regret it every day." Miguel looked at Matthew, then to Marilia. He had no anger. The moment he found the baby, he had chosen him to save him. Now the person who abandoned him came to claim a place in his life. That would not be simple. Marilia apologized and at the same time pleaded to let her stay, at least to see how Matthew had lived all this time. There was sincerity in its cry, repentance in each word. Miguel's sister Clara approached, curious but without judgments. She was very careful with dedication and knew that life was full of invisible pain. Matthew was not sure how to deal with everything. He felt gratitude for Miguel and Dona Rosa, who welcomed him. However, see Marilia there, being consumed by guilt, stirred her heart. It was divided between the love he knew and this bound of blood that arose. Miguel, taking a deep breath, touched Matthew's shoulder with love, turning to Marilia. "You are his mother. I won't deny it. He is here, whole, because there were those who look at him. But if you want to approach, well, we are nobody to deny. Just don't hurt the boy again." Marilia nodded, renewed tears on her face. Miguel's request was fair. It was this or nothing, to regain step by step the confidence of the child he had left behind. In the following days, Marilia's presence in the simple house changed the routine. There were moments of discomfort, for Matthew still didn't know how to call her mother, Marilia, or none of that. Miguel was also insecure. That woman brought back difficult memories, but her pain seemed real, and her desire to fix things sincere. Between care and silences, it was clear with a little better health who helped break the barriers. One day, while everyone was gathered, she invited Marilia to talk about past times, to understand what she had led her to give up the baby. At first it was painful for both, but something began to dispose, the tension, the resistance. Marilia told her family abandonment, extreme difficulties, the lack of any support. How, in desperation, left his son where maybe someone could find him and take better care of him. Miguel heard without judging, for he himself knew what misery and helplessness was. Matthew, in turn, felt my heart swing. It was not easy to forgive, but at the same time, he could not ignore Marilia's suffering. Each time she spoke, the certainty that guilt had devoured her for all those years arose. Perhaps he had the right not to forgive her, but also recognized that the grudge would not take him far away. One afternoon, Marilia called Matthew for a walk to the bridge where everything had happened. She wanted to show her, finally, the reasons that led her to make that decision in the past. With hesitant steps, the boy agreed. Miguel was apprehensive, but understood that it was inevitable for healing. On the bridge, Marilia stopped and, staring at the river with tears contained, told Matthew every detail of the day she had left him there. The hours of despair, the guilt you have pursued her ever since. Hearing that, Matthew cried. He thought of the pain of being abandoned and at the same time the despair his mother had felt. And even without knowing how, he hugged her, speechless, just dividing the pain that wasn't only hers, but also his. "I can't forget what you did," he said with teary eyes, "but I want to understand, not to keep hatred on me." Marilia sobbed and hugged her son carefully, almost fearing it was a dream. The journey for reconstruction would not end there. Both knew that forgiveness does not sprout from day to day, but that hug represented the possibility of moving on, even injured. In the following weeks, Marilia began to live increasingly present in the routine of Matthew. He helped Dona Rosa when she had fever seizures, put it clear to rest in the days of asthmatic crisis, and cooperate with Miguel in daily tasks. Even though the house was far from comfort, what were left was a feeling of companionship that grew every day. Matthew, observing everything, began to realize that loving did not mean having to choose. He could be grateful to Miguel, admire Dona Rosa, love Clara as a sister, and yet make a space for Marilia, who tried to be the mother she could never. Love, he realized, was not limited to one side. Finally, at a simple dinner, everyone gathered. Marilia, shy, set out to thank. "I don't know how to say how much you helped me. I don't know if I deserve it all, but thank you for being careful of my boy." Miguel smiled, responding with the calm of those who had already faced many battles. We did what needed to be done, and now you are part of it all. Matthew looked around. He saw there a family that, even without luxuries, had formed a protective net for him. Donna Rosa, Clara, Miguel, and now Marilia. He was fortunate, although the story had begun in abandonment. Life is unpredictable, but if there is love, everything can heal, even if it leaves scars. The night advanced, illuminated by candles, as light had lacked again, but the climate was peace. Between laughs and conversations, everyone realized that the true family is built when we choose to protect each other. There, under that humble ceiling, something greater than one's past had been forged. And so, in that house full of painful memories and recent joys, everyone understood that fate can be cruel, but love has the strength to transform it. Each scar, every repentance, every gesture of kindness was another brick in a construction that would never be shaken. Subscribe to the channel to keep following stories that warm the soul. Leave your like and count on the comments from where you are watching us. Because in the end, the only thing that truly matters is understanding that love is not measured in possessions or certainties, but in the courage to face pain and support each other. And there, in that simple house, there was the living proof that the greatest wealth someone can have is never to give up on loving, even when the world seems to crumble around.